Hello and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues, a conversation of ideas. This week, the BJP juggernaut showed no sign of slowing down. The big win in local elections in Delhi, and of course, in West Bengal, Amit Shah says it's now Bengal's turn next. What exactly is the larger shift we're seeing in political thought today? Has Hindutva replaced secularism? Is minority politics dead? For more on that, joining me now is Manoj Tiwari, head of the Delhi BJP. Congratulations, Tiwari ji. Also, of course, Delhi MP. I'm also joined by Sachin Pilot, head of the Rajasthan Congress. Also with me, Abhishek Mishra, ex-minister of the Samajwadi Party government. He's also a PhD from Cambridge. I'm also joined by Shahid Siddiqui. He's editor of Nayi Dunya. But Shahid Bhai has also been a member of all the so-called secular parties. Also with me, Professor Dipankar Gupta, a well-known sociologist, academic, including from JNU at one point. But Manoj Tiwari won't hold that against you. So thank you all very much for joining us. Manoj Tiwari ji, congratulations, you've just had a great win. But everyone is asking, did the fact that PM Modi would win even an election where the BJP has ruled for 10 years, there's been lots of complaints about governance, but fir bhi aap jeet gaye, and with such a huge majority. Do you feel it's because there's an identification Prime Minister Modi and a new Hindutva kind of politics?
ये नरेंद्र मोदी जी के फेस का नहीं, नरेंद्र मोदी जी के 3 साल के काम का जीत है
जी।
उससे लोगों का विश्वास बढ़ा है। और जिस प्रकार की राजनीति दिल्ली में हुई है, निगेटिव पॉलिटिक्स, हमेशा नकारात्मक सोचना, नकारात्मक दोषारोपण करना, मतलब यहाँ तक कि चीफ मिनिस्टर धमकी दे दिल्ली को। और ऐसी स्थिति में हम लोग जब गलियों में जाते थे, झुग्गियों में रहते थे, लोग के बीच में हम रह रहे हैं, जो हम नोट्स बनाते हैं, उनमें लोगों का विश्वास है नरेंद्र मोदी जी के काम पे। फेस हमेशा नहीं चलता, लेकिन अगर 3 साल का काम है तो निश्चित रूप से वो असर दिखा रहा है, लोगों का विश्वास बढ़ा है।
आप काम कह रहे हैं, पर क्या ये भी सच है कि अभी सेक्युलर पॉलिटिक्स, दैट पीपल आर एंग्री विद सेक्युलर पॉलिटिक्स? आप भी तो समाजवादी पार्टी, सो कॉल्ड सेक्युलर पार्टी में रहे हैं, आप योगी आदित्यनाथ के खिलाफ यू फॉट एन इलेक्शन. What's the big difference in that time of politics and today's politics?
देखिए, लोग ये सेक्युलर वगैरह लोग नहीं चर्चा करते हैं, ये हमारे आपके स्टूडियो में सिर्फ चर्चा होती है। लोगों को ये सबसे कोई मतलब नहीं है। लोग जहाँ कोई तनाव होता है उसमें अपनी बातें रख लेते हैं, लेकिन लोगों को राहत चाहिए, लोगों को सच्चाई चाहिए
जी।
लोगों को चाहिए जो व्यक्ति जो कर रहा, जो इवन करे वो तो बात की बात है, जो कह रहा है करने की कोशिश कर रहा है कि नहीं, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है उन लोगों के लिए।
Let me bring in Sachin Pilot. Sachin, Manoj ji is saying that it's about work. Nothing else matters, secularism, Hindutva, all lofty political thoughts. But do you find, and especially in North India, that within the Congress there seems to be a churn as well? Many leaders saying apparently that perhaps the Congress should not look more now at a soft Hindutva approach, and this whole brand of minority appeasement or the Congress's secular politics is failing. I mean, in Rajasthan as well, you just had a by-election defeat. Is it just about work and government, or is there a larger shift happening?
You see, in the last few years, the narrative in Indian politics has changed. Last 3 years in this country, the discussion has mainly circled around, and what Manoj is saying is, I don't think completely true, because today the discussion in India is about love jihad, ghar wapsi, anti-Romeo squads, Gaurakshaks. These discussions didn't happen 3 years ago. So there is a reason why these things are now discussed, talked about and debated, and that's taking the focus away from आज मूंग की दाल 150 रुपए किलो बिक रही है, तेल के दाम क्या हैं, रोजगार, किसान आत्महत्या कर रहे हैं. Those discussions are now in the background because they're not as emotive as these discussions. And I think to say that every victory is because of the work that they've done, I don't think in Delhi the last 10 years the MCD's performance is anything spectacular. If it was, they would have repeated some of their best performing councillors. They removed all of them and gave fresh new tickets to buck the anti-incumbency. And there are many factors that go into an election. But to say that secular politics, I also don't agree that we have to divide our polity in between secularism and minority appeasement. We must do fair politics. We must be upright, just, rule of law and our constitution. These things about
Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas.
Well, that's the narrative. But on reality, what's happening on the ground is far from Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. People are being lynched and killed, and there's mob justice, medieval justice taking place on the streets of India.
And Vasundhara Raje stayed silent on that.
For 24 days.
Let me get in Abhishek Mishra, because Abhishek Mishra, as I said, Manoj Tiwari ji is pale in the Samajwadi Party. Yeah. But the fact that, especially in Uttar Pradesh, what the Samajwadi Party and the BSP had become over the last 10 years, the fact that at one time even Patriarch was called Maulana Mulayam, the fact that Mayawati put over 100 Muslim candidates and said very openly that vote for us, we will protect you. And often the Samajwadi Party Congress was being called a Muslim alliance. Do you think that actually backfired, that you all had defined secularism as pro-Muslim?
Well, secularism cannot be defined as pro-anything. The very idea of secularism is that the institution of religion, the institution of the church as such, must not come in to influence politics. Whether you call it Hinduism or whether you call it Hindu appeasement or Muslim appeasement or Christianity or Jainism or whatever religion name you take, secularism is defined by the very basis of that it does not influence, religion does not influence state policy, it does not influence state practice. And people who are running the state are not biased for or against anybody.
But that was the criticism against Samajwadi Party by Yogi Adityanath.
Let me just come to that, yeah. So the way it was presented in the UP elections, especially by some of the tallest leaders the country has today, unfortunately, was on the lines of religion. So efforts were made very typically to divide people on the basis of religion, and the way the Samajwadi Party does politics is to take everybody along. We did not talk about Hindus, we did not talk about Muslims, we did not talk about Sikhs, we did not talk about Jains, we did not talk about anybody. We talked about, we had two basic approaches when we went to elections. One was Kaam Bolta Hai. We took our developmental activities, we took the expressways that we created, we took the metro systems that we created, we took the changes in the policing structures, 102, 108, ambulance networks.
But I'm just going to bring in, because Manoj again, because Manoj ji, आप गोरखपुर से हैं, so जो समाजवादी पार्टी, what Abhishek ji is saying that काम बोलता है. Do you think कि जैसे मैंने कहा कि जो pro minority politics, क्या वो यूपी में it had become to such a level where there needed to be a balance, where you needed Yogi to come in?
एक तो मुझे बोलता है पे बहुत एतराज है, क्योंकि ये देश का लोग बहुत बोलता है, नेता लोग बहुत बोलता है, दिखता क्यों नहीं है? It should be seen. दिखना चाहिए काम. बोलने को तो जीव है लंबी सी, जिसको जो बोलना है बोल दे. देखिए, मैं बहुत शो ये देखता हूँ और बहुत तरह के, मैं पहली बार ऐसे शो में बैठा हूँ. ये जो बातें यहाँ होती हैं ना जी, इसको कभी जाके झुग्गी में बैठिए, बैठ करके इसका एनालाइज करिए. कभी गांव में बैठ के इसकी बातें करिए. उनको लगता है क्या टाइम वेस्ट हो रहा है. रोटी की बात करिए, लोगों के रोजगार की बात करिए. ये जो सेकुलर और अनसेकुलर जो हुआ ना, ये जहर परोसता है लोगों में. नहीं,
पर मनोज जी आप कह रहे हैं कि बोलता है, तो फिर आप रोजगार का कह रहे हैं. तो अभी ये जो एनडीए सरकार का सबसे रिकॉर्ड खराब है रोजगार, जॉब्स क्रिएट करने में, तो काम का अगर आप कह रहे हैं तो ये भी नहीं है कि इतना काम हुआ है मोदी जी के सरकार में कि जॉब्स बने हैं. तो ये भी तो लोग फैक्ट से चैलेंज करेंगे. जब योगी जी उत्तर प्रदेश के चीफ मिनिस्टर बन गए तो ये भी तो बोलता है ना.
नहीं बोलता नहीं, दिख ही रहा है. देखिए अगर महिलाओं की सुरक्षा हो रही है, अब इसको एंटी रोमियो नाम को लेकर के इतनी बदनामी. महिलाओं की सुरक्षा होनी चाहिए कि नहीं होनी चाहिए? स्कूल से निकलती लड़कियों को सेफ्टी मिलनी चाहिए कि नहीं मिलनी चाहिए? ये तो बहुत, उन घर में जाके पूछिए उद्यार तो कितने खुश हैं वो
जी. पर जो मैं पूछ रही थी कि जो अंडर करंट यूपी में हुआ था, जो कब्रिस्तान का रिमार्क हुआ था, प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहे थे, क्या वो अंडर करंट जो था हिंदू अलायंस मुस्लिम अलायंस का नहीं हुआ था कि बीजेपी हिंदुओं का पार्टी है?
मैं समझता हूं आप माइग्रेशन पे थोड़ा सा ध्यान दीजिए जी. उत्तर प्रदेश से माइग्रेशन लगातार हो रहा है. अगर 5,000 की भी नौकरी चाहिए तो उनको भाग करके बॉम्बे, दिल्ली, पंजाब जाना ही पड़ता है. उसकी बात हुई क्या कभी? हम लोग भी वही माइग्रेटेड लोग हैं. हम लोग कौन हैं? हम लोग तो 10 घंटा बिजली के लिए भागे हैं गांव से कि चलो भाई वहां जाएंगे तो कम से कम पंखा चलता मिलेगा, लाइट जली. तो इन बातों पे जो डिस्कशन नहीं होता है ना, उससे लोगों को तकलीफ होती है जी. उनको जो इफेक्ट होता है कि भाई हमको जब नौकरी करना है, कमाना है, तो हम क्यों गुजरात जाके कमा ले रहे हैं, लाखों लाख लोग कमा रहे हैं, यूपी में क्यों नहीं कमा रहे?
Shahid Siddiqui, come in on what Manoj Tiwari is also saying, that these are the real issues that matter in elections. They're ignored in dialogues like this perhaps. But also the fact, do these issues of secularism, Hindutva politics, etc. play a role, and the feeling perhaps that this is a course correction that was needed?
No, they do have an impact, but slogans don't. whether it's a slogan of Sabka Saath or it's a slogan of Kaam Bolta Hai, ultimately what's the perception of the common man on the ground about what you are saying, your work and what you are saying.
Your credibility.
And the same for idea of secularism and all. The problem has been that unfortunately in this country, people have, the political parties for their own political interest have used the idea of secularism not to give justice to everybody, but to get votes from this section or that section, whether it's Mandal, caste politics, or Kamandal, Hindutva or Muslim politics, by creating fear of the other. Whether they have created the fear of the Muslims, these people have created among the Muslims the fear of the Hindus, among the Yadavs the fear of the upper caste, among the upper caste the fear of the lower caste. So politics of fear, which has been played for last 30-40 years in this country, has damaged the society, and that's where Modi ji comes in and is giving a new hope, whether that will materialize or not. But his message is going that look, you don't have to fear, especially to the Hindus. The Muslim fear remains, the fear has increased, but the idea of secularism, people don't understand on the ground. What they understand is what is going to happen to me and my children tomorrow, what is their future, whether in jobs or even life.
Let me ask you, Professor Dipankar Gupta, is secularism as we saw it in the Indian context, maybe since after Indira Gandhi, is that form of secularism now dead? Are we seeing now a creation of a new ideology where every party is competing to be in some shades of that? For instance, Mamata Banerjee going to a Puri temple, having to say that to prove that she's Hindu, a Facebook post that I don't eat beef. Every party now has to compete in a completely different way than it used to earlier.
Well, you see, I have a problem with the way you started the question.
Okay.
Because I think this tendency was started by Mrs. Indira Gandhi.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, going to temples and so forth. Yes. Mrs. Indira Gandhi was also the person who started caste wars. And she wasn't above religious wars either. If you take into account the number of riots that were held in that happened in India,
Especially in Kashmir, Jammu election.
You know, I mean, everywhere, Bhagalpur to
Bhagalpur, right.
wherever, you know,
Moradabad, right?
Moradabad. Anyway, so that's history. We know it. And we know that all these riots happened during Congress time. In Delhi massacre happened during president's rule, for God's sake, you know. So it is not as if this is happening for the first time. And this is where I feel I agree with my fellow panelists here, that a huge dose of cynicism has set in with the way in which we practiced secularism. And this cynicism is something that I think worked against secularism rather than helping it. We called everything that was minority appeasing or caste appeasing or whatever, we passed them off as secular. And I think that was the wrong thing to do, which is what gave the other side a lot of room to expand. That's number one. Number two, you must also realize that elections are contextual. We must move beyond elections to understand large processes like secularism and see whether or not really religion is playing a role. Now, I think religion plays a role in terms of identity politics during elections. Post-elections, other things matter. And I would think that people like us, when we discuss secularism, we should be turning the heat on in terms of not Gorakshas and so forth, because that's exactly what they want.
Yes.
You know, we should turn the heat on and say, as I think you mentioned, what is the price of dal or rice, or what are you doing about education? These are the questions that nobody ever asks any party. I'm not just saying this one. Nobody asks anybody. They instead ask sensational issues. And I agree that if you go to a village, they're not going to talk to you about secularism in this kind of lofty fashion. They will ask you questions like, what about education? I mean, most people in villages today are so worried about their children's education. You know, that is something that worries them the most. So these are the issues that really come up. And I do believe that if we can now turn our attention to non-spectacular issues, but daily issues that bother people all the time, the everyday grind of lives, I think we'll do a lot more for everybody.
Yes.
So, Sergeant Pilot, is it time for a Congress reset in the kind of secularism it practices and the kind of politics it practices? You've had another MP, Shashi Tharoor, coming out saying the Congress can't be BJP light because it'll be like Coke Zero, the result will be zero. So, how is the Congress going to reinvent itself in a situation like this?
No, I take great pride in the tradition that I have had, because I may be a Hindu and I don't need anyone's certificate to be proven how Hindu I am, and I think it's wrong for anyone to try and prove it, because you're falling into that trap. This country has survived for 5,000 years and had a really strong constitution. I think we have all those fundamentals in place. There is no real need to redefine that. And what Mr. Gupta said is absolutely true. any government that takes power in state or the center is confined by the rule of our constitution and what has been the right thing to do. The minute we go into religious matters, we start intervening and looking for votes as governments, I think then we are doing a great injustice to our society. The Congress party, frankly, I think is one party, despite what my friend from the BJP might say, is one that really encompasses the entire length and breadth of this country. And the fact that for so many years it survived and done well for itself is because it represents everyone. There's space for every voice, no matter how minuscule you may be. And I think that's the real ethos of our country. Because
but why isn't it finding resonance then? Why isn't it finding resonance with the voters
there is
today?
a phase of election campaigns, losing and winning. I think you cannot define a party's future by 1 or 2 or 3 losses. We have a long history, we have a long future, we will fight and come back. But idea is that India is far more important than the BJP or the Congress. Are we doing justice to India's future today by talking about emotive issues and taking the focus away from the real issues like Dr. Gupta said? We've got to think about the job creation, the agri crisis, the environment, the internal security, all those things that are happening and is bothering us as citizens. Or should we go into the emotive issues of mandir and masjid and temple and all the things, slogans that we keep hearing for the last 3 years? We've got to rise above that, because today's India is looking for a different direction, which is deprived of all these caste and war clashes we've had on religion in the times gone by.